I was going to try to come on here and do an Australian accent, but nobody wants to hear that. It would not do justice to the kind of weekend that Travis Bazzana had for Oregon State. We're going to talk about that. And of course, we're going to overreact to the Guardians' first spring training games of the year because Jeff loves spring training.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's spring training? My kid had ice skating and swimming, and I took a nap. And yeah, I didn't watch any spring training. I'm just gonna be honest about that. I spent a lot of time watching college baseball, though. But before we get into all the fun of the college baseball this weekend, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Yeah, spring training baseball. I'm not going to watch any of it. Like I've said that every year, and I'm going to stand my ground. I would much rather watch a college game. And now I have a co-host who's going to take the hit for the team. I'm just going to mute my mic now because it's spring training time, and I have nothing to say.
Hey, I did both, just for the record. Also, I don't have kids, but I did go to a kid's birthday party on Sunday, and I still had time to watch the Guardians game on Sunday, and I watched plenty of college baseball as well, which we're going to talk to a lot today. So thanks for tuning in and making Locked On Guardians your first listen. Wherever you get podcasts, we're free everywhere, including YouTube. Oh, tomorrow's episode, if you're listening to this on YouTube or you're an audio listener, it's a little late because we have a new recording software we're using. So this audio might be a little bit late getting to you, but let's overreact to spring training because that's what we should do the first two games of the year, right? Because everybody's ready to go north and play 162 games. But a couple takeaways from the weekend. Rocchio and Jimenez got the first shot as a double play combo on Saturday. Looked pretty good out there. Both made a couple nice plays. It looked like it was going to be a nice combination. I thought it was interesting that he got the first run, but they're both going to get a lot of time, so there's no reason to look into who's playing and when, at least in terms of the first couple of games. As far as stats go, not even stats, but Will Brennan did hit a home run off a left-hander on Sunday. That's fun, and Arias had a hit off of a left-hander. I still think he can hit left-handers. I think it was just a very weird fluke. And I've said before, we'll talk about this when we do our spring training position previews, but I'm still not ready to give up on Will Brennan. So that was very fun to see. And then Scott Barlow's slider on Sunday looked really good as far as performances go in spring training. The one thing you look at is breaking stuff generally doesn't move a ton in Arizona because of the environment. So it can be hard for guys to throw curveballs and sliders. That was not the case for Barlow. On Sunday, he looked really good. Probably the best pitcher, I think, out of anybody for the Guardians this weekend. Although Jack Leftwich looked pretty good, but that was late in the game. But Scott Barlow looked really good. So had a couple guys looking pretty solid early on. Some guys that didn't, but that's okay. And the important part is almost everybody's healthy, Jeff. Almost. Not everybody.
I'll come back to this.
Well, we have a Spino, but, you know.
I mean, if you were to make a guess who is the most likely player to be hurt, you know, what do you always say? I'm not going to step on your words, but the most likely indicator of
that's not my saying. That's people smarter than me saying it. That's Russell Carlton. I always see that from on Baseball Prospectus, but it is, unfortunately, it's so if you haven't heard by now, I would think you did if you're listening, but if not, George Valera's got a hamstring injury and he is going to miss quote multiple weeks. So it's going to be a while until he gets on the field again. And he had a hamstring injury last year. I don't know if it's the same hamstring, honestly, but what happened last year was he had off-season wrist surgery on his hamate, which was his second wrist injury. He came back in spring training from that wrist surgery. And then he left with wrist soreness, and he had to sit out most of the early part of spring with that. Then he came back in like May, I think. And then as soon as he came back, he had the hamstring issue, which kept him out another month. And this, could very well be another month as well. We don't really know, but not a good spot for him. I mean, he's also had an oblique issue in the past. This is not his first hamstring. He's had multiple wrist injuries. It's unfortunately piling up for him. And 2022 is really the only year that he played a full season. Like he had a decent amount of at bats. So it's been a while. We only had one chance to look at George Valera for a full season, really. And 2022 was AA and part of AAA. And it was a good season for him. He hit really well in AA. He got to AAA. He was okay. So I guess we have an idea of what it looks like when he's fully healthy. But in his career, since coming aboard to the organization in 2018 as a 17-year-old, that's really the only year he has had a full season. He had 363 plate appearances in 2021, but the only time he's gotten over 400 plate appearances was 2022. So we have an idea of what it looks like when he's healthy, and it's good. It was good. It was 23 home runs and a pretty good average, pretty good, mostly good OBP and slug, but that's who he kind of is. But this is a tough spot. I'm going to let you say a couple of words about Valera at this point, though, because I've got a take on it where I just think it's not a good spot for Cleveland. This is a very bad situation for both the player and the team.
Yeah, he's just we saw him get to AAA, and like coming into this season, I was like, well, the guy just hasn't been he's not been healthy, and then he didn't look good. And the more time there is, the less we should be having more consistent views on him, and said we have less. And it was always a tricky profile. I'll go back to when he was like a really hot prospect in low A, and everyone was like plus hit to him. Like, there's no way. There's no bleeping way. Family show. But it's like, this is a guy who always had, a decent amount of swing and miss to his game. He has a good eye, but there's always swing and miss. It's been weird scouting reports from the beginning. Yes. And the scouting reports on him have always been odd. It's always been like, you can see who's like just looking at stuff and who's looking at scouting and looking at numbers and using all the aspects, not just one. Right. And he has good tools, but at what point do you just sit back and go, this dude isn't healthy? And he's never going to be healthy because he has never been healthy. And it's very clearly his body can't hold up. And, we go into this year. This is why you go and you trade for Florio. Like, one could make a case that Florio and Valera have had somewhat similar tracks as big name prospects, guys who were center fielder types who, in Valera's case, shifted over, but have not produced. And I just think we're seeing, again, you can't count against George Valera on this team. And I mean, I'm not saying he's to the point where you consider taking him off to the 40 man, but he's getting to the point where he's one of the, they're not going to, but it's like, I don't know. He's not a top 10 prospect to me anymore. Like, if he can't be healthy, you can't make him a prospect. Yes, Espino has some similar issues, but it's more of like that one stretch. We did have some periods of health. Valera's had no periods of health. He's got this year, and then you got to figure out what you're going to do. Because then, I mean, is this his last option year? It feels like so it's like, if he's not healthy at the end of this year, he might come off the 40 man just because they don't have another choice, like at the start of next year. Can you count on this guy? It's going to be weird. Let's just put it that way. It is a weird situation, but health, it's important.
The best ability is availability, right? That's a pretty common line. Again, these are people that say this that are smarter than I am. I assume smarter than both of us, but I don't want to insult you. No, the option year is what's the biggest thing for me here. It's the timing, right? Because timing is everything. Taking advantage of opportunities, and now you've got guys like Chase DeLauder and nobody took advantage of the opportunity last year in right field, right? Will Brennan didn't seize it. Oscar Gonzalez proved that what he did was probably a fluke. We'll see. Just nobody laid claim to that right field spot, and it was wide open for Valera to have a great spring training this year and go to AAA, play well, and earn himself that opportunity. Noel, whatever. No, we're not as high on him either, but that there's a wide open spot for someone to come in to take claim to it. But the option year here for Valera is what the biggest problem is, because I don't think he's going to miss enough time at this point. I mean, who knows? More injuries could crop up, but this is his final option year. You can always get a fourth year. If you miss enough time, you can appeal to the league, and that has happened before. Cleveland has successfully done that in the past, but you've got to miss almost a significant amount of time. I don't know if this hamstring issue specifically will do that for him, but he will certainly miss at least probably a month at this point. But yeah, the injury concerns are the biggest part here. Like I said, in 2022, he was healthy most of the year. We know what it looks like when he's healthy. It's fine. He did have issues with left-handers, so there was always that part of his game too. But the biggest thing here is you're not going to get a good chance for this guy to go to AAA, play well, get a good evaluation of him, understand where he fits within your outfield ecosystem. And if he can hit lefties, if he's the guy who can be the everyday right fielder, even if he's platoon option, like, you're not going to be able to get a real good look at him in AAA this year at the way the injuries are going. And that's the biggest problem is Cleveland cannot afford to not have a final look at him and say, okay, we know what you are. Because next year when he comes into camp, without of options, what do you do? Because you can't send the AAA, but you haven't had enough time to evaluate him. And who knows if he gets hurt again next year. Got a couple more things I want to get to on Valera. Stephen Vogt has mentioned Joey Cantillo a couple times this weekend and some other left-handed pitchers that the Guardians could take in the MLB draft. We're going to talk a lot about the 1-1 spot and some top college performances from the weekend. Unfortunately, you can no longer bet on individual, at least in the state of Ohio, you can no longer bet on player props in college. Otherwise, you might want to go out there and throw some money down on, I don't know, Hagen Smith or Travis Bazzana at this point, the way they're playing. I know you can bet on that, at least teams, but you can't bet on individual player performances at the moment. What you can do is get some buckets on your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So if you're a new customer, go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, put $5 down any bet, and if it wins, you'll get $150 in bonus bets. You can bet on NBA players and teams with quick bets, same game parlays, player props there, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA and the NFL and Major League Baseball. All of them. Yeah, no more player props.
Before we go on, I do want to throw something in here very quickly. One last kind of note for me on Valera. I think, I was thinking about this. If you had told me, 3-4 years ago that by 2024, that Valera hadn't played with Cleveland in the big leagues yet, I would have assumed he would have been traded.
Yep.
It's like we're into that situation that by now it's like with the rate he was moving in the early going and just the skills, it's like, we would have, there was a point where, the minor leagues at the top were a little bit shaky. And this is back when I was still fighting for Nolan Jones to be the number one guy. And I think I had Jones 1, Valera 2, Freeman 3, like that infamous year. And it's like, hasn't really turned out great. But yeah, I think it's just, you can kind of go back and look at that and see just how much has been lost in terms of time and development.
Yeah, that's the thing I was saying. It's just when you're not on the field, the team can't evaluate what you can do. You can't improve your skills. You can't go out there and work on stuff because you're constantly working on rehabbing. Obviously he doesn't want to get hurt, and it's unfortunate for him that, Valera, I know how much he loves the game. I've watched him play. I've talked to him. He loves playing and he's a great dude by all counts. It's just when you're not on the field, the team can't evaluate you. And like you said, next year he's going to be out of options. You either have to carry him in the major leagues or you got to do something else. Here's my real issue. What's going to happen here, right? Is let's hope worst case scenario he misses a month and he comes back in like May, right? And he's fine the rest of the year. No guarantees that's going to happen because of his injury history, but I think the real concern here is this. Let's say he misses a significant amount of time this year and you don't know what to do with him going in the next season. You don't want to keep, like, you get to spring training, right? And you don't want to keep him on your roster because he hasn't played enough, or you don't have enough evaluation on him, or, somebody else claims the right field job, right? Like Chase DeLauder takes a step forward and you're ready to leave it open for him, or Will Brennan hits like great in 2024. Any of those guys, somebody lays claim to the right field spot and there's nowhere for Valera to go and he's out of options. The real issue here is this, and it's going to be no fault of their own, but Cleveland could be in a spot where they are forced to trade him. Do you remember what happened with Eric Gonzalez and Giovanni Urshela that one year where they were both out of options? And it took a few years for Urshela to find his footing in the majors. He was DFA'd by Toronto and New York before New York kind of helped unlock some things and he got good. So I can't really fault Cleveland for that one because they gave him opportunities. But that final year of Urshela's last year where he didn't have an option, and neither did Eric Gonzalez, I think Urshela had a hamstring issue in spring training, and those guys were both fighting for the utility role. And they couldn't evaluate Urshela because he got hurt, and they wound up trading him, and they kept Gonzalez after all that happened. And again, it took a couple tries for Urshela to figure it out, and he's gone on to have a decent career since then. But what happens if this, Valera gets hurt again next year, or you just don't, he comes into spring training next year, you don't know what to do with him, and somebody else has laid claim to the right field job, and you just don't have a spot for him. And
I think you're lucky. Well, like if someone has laid claim and you're good, then you just have to
right. But
sometimes that's a cost of doing business. Like it's not.
But at that point, though, here's the problem. At that point, if you don't have room for Valera and he hasn't proven himself, he's going to have low trade value, but you're forced to trade him. And I hate to be a Debbie Downer and be negative, but what you get into a scenario where Cleveland trades him because they don't have room for him, and somebody else has taken the right field job, and Valera's out of options. You trade him to, God knows who.
Well, I think the hope is by then
going on to be a good player.
Yeah, but the hope is by then, you're going to either know that Brennan's going to work out or he's not. You're going to know a few of these other guys. The Lauder may not. I don't think he's going to move that quickly. If I'm being honest, with just some of his swing choice issues. I think it is. We're putting the cart before the horse a bit. I think we have time to worry about it. It is something we do want to stand out and look at, but I think right now I'm not as worried about him at this point in time. If he is unhealthy this entire year and then you trade him away, the chances of him all of a sudden getting healthy and staying healthy are very low. So I think it's just one of those things that, if you try to find a place to keep him as your fourth outfielder, because he can probably play all three spots. And, hopefully in a year, you're going to have an idea on Florial and Brennan, and, then you have that kind of wandering spot. But I want to talk about Cantillo because I think Cantillo is a better prospect. And I think it is interesting what is being said about Cantillo, because you and I mean, when the trade was made, I thought Cantillo was the number 2 piece in the trade. I thought he was. He was such a Guardians type of pitcher. He, already had that good secondary stuff, and health again was his biggest issue. He was healthy last year. One can look at the numbers. He played in a very hitter-friendly park, so yes, his home run rate went up. Don't read too much into that, but I think Cantillo, when they're going out of their way, much like a year ago when they talked about some of the young arms, Cantillo's stuff is right up there with some of the other, with Bybee and Williams. His stuff is closer to them than it is Allen. Control command, not as much, but I think Cantillo is a little bit of a forgotten man, and he should not be.
No, and Cleveland has not forgotten him, because Stephen Vogt kind of went out of his way twice over the weekend talking to reporters about just his presence on the mound and how impressed he has been with him going out there and the work he's put in to be ready for this situation. Because in theory, he should be the first pitcher recalled if anything happens. He'll go to AAA. You might consider Hunter Gaddis or Curry or somebody
Lively,
or Ben Lively with if you need a spot start. But if there were to be an injury at this point, or something like that, you would be calling Cantillo for a longer term help. But yeah, Vogt has been impressed, and that's Stephen Vogt's got a lot to take in his first spring training, right? He's got hundreds of players to keep an eye on, and lots of people's names to learn, and new things to watch and new things to process through. He has got a lot on his plate. So for him to take notice of Joey Cantillo, and to be fair, I think the one thing that's always worth mentioning is, watch how they make decisions and make actions versus words, because words are only words. But for someone like Vogt to go out of his way and say, I'm impressed with his presence on the mound and the work he's put in to be ready for this opportunity, and just all the things they're noticing with Cantillo, I think it stands out, and it stands out for a reason. The stuff is good. The only thing you could point out, like you said, the health is an issue. He did not have a healthy 2021 or 2022. He was great in the first half of 2022, and he was healthy. But he made it September last time for I think the first time in his career. He might have made it September in 2019. I can't remember, but the only thing you can look at there too is that his fastball velocity declined a little bit in September. It was 92, 94 as opposed to 93, 96 as it was all year. But that could be the effects of pitching for a full season for the first time. And some of that work that Vogt could be referring to is his body being ready to go out there and perform for the entire season and not wear down in September. That could be part of it. So yeah, the fastball is quality. He gets extension. He's got velocity now. When Cleveland got him, he was throwing 88 to 92 and topping out at 94. Now, I don't think he throws a pitch under 90. And the changeup's always been plus. The added velocity has helped the curveball to the point where it's an above average pitch. He's got a slider that's not quite as good as the other ones, but it's command and health. And I think people thought, before the injuries that Cantillo would be a guy with really good control. I think the time off from the injuries might have been part of that. I don't know, but the stuff's good. So I think it's impressive that he has at least made himself stand out to Vogt, and it's worth talking about, which we just did.
Should we come back from break and talk some college baseball?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So much to talk about this weekend.
We had some unbelievable performances. And one player that people are kind of anointing as a superstar in the making, and another guy who had the performance of the weekend, which we'll get into on today's Locked On Guardians. Passion, drive, patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or very importantly, your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into an MVP and win that batting title. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers.
All right, where do we start? I think the important thing here is, let's start with the guys who are either in the 1-1 conversation or who are making their name.
I think you have to start with Hagen Smith, because that was statistically, I didn't get to watch this one, but statistically it was maybe the most unreal pitching performance I have ever seen. Facing Oklahoma State and Travis Bazzana, where he's facing the guy who is, I said Oklahoma but they ended up facing Oklahoma later in the league, right? Wasn't it like a tournament or something going on there? But either way, facing Oregon State, facing a very good lineup. I'm not going to bury the lead. He went 6 innings. That's 18 outs, right? 17 strikeouts. 17 out of 18 outs via strikeout. 3 of them on Bazzana. Bazzana also had a great weekend after this game, and even in this game, the minute they took out Hagen Smith, he got a hit. He stole a base. Yeah. He did some good things. But my goodness, like, Hagen Smith was my number 3 pitcher coming of the year. I had him going 13th overall in my way too early mock at the start. And, Brody Brecht has just phenomenal stuff at the top. Chase Burns, we've talked about. But Hagen Smith has always, as a lefty, been that guy who is to me, the very solid number 3. And then after him was the drop with guys like Yasavich, who I do like, and Santucci, who I think both those guys are going to go somewhere in the top 30. There's a crystallizing top 5 here, but my goodness.
Yeah, the highlights were really good for Smith. I mean, he's got people compare him a little bit to Josh Hader, and that's because some of his control wasn't good before. But he also had Tommy John, so he's healthy now. Yeah. He was up to 99. He was holding 96 in that 6th inning. He had command of the slider. I don't know about a third pitch for him, but my God, his fastball was electric. He has like 17 or 18 inches of vertical break, and the slider is just absolutely insane. He had command of that. It was just one of the best performances I've seen. And I don't know if we can sit there and say, like, today he's in the 1-1 conversation, but I think that performance makes you say, like, okay, he should be somebody you should keep an eye on just in case, this performance continues to translate for him and he carries this into the bulk of the season. And he could very well push his way into the conversation because he's a left-handed pitcher who could dominate the SEC with ace type stuff. I mean, you said it, like, there are good pitchers in this Guardian staff. There's not a lot of pitchers in this organization, though, that have Hagen Smith's upside.
Yeah, he's, it comes down to that third pitch and kind of getting that command back. He blew out his arm as a sophomore in high school. That was the first time he had Tommy John. I was pulling up his MLB.com profile, 7 no-hitters as a senior. Upper 90s fastball, potential plus slider. Third pitch is the work in progress. But and for everyone who's like, no, they have to take a bat. Pitchers sometimes move quicker than hitters, and all that drafting a Hagen Smith means is then all of a sudden you have the pitching depth to go out and trade for a bat, right? Like we've talked about before. I hope they extend Tanner. I think he makes a ton of sense. Logan Allen's ceiling isn't quite as high. But Gavin Williams is sitting there and has Scott Boras as a manager. So if
it's a ticking time bomb before you
time
trade him,
bomb.
yeah.
So it's, it's just one of those situations. If Hagen Smith is great, then Hagen Smith moves up and it gives you the ability to get someone, if you flip a major league arm, a proven starter with, number 2 upside like Williams, you're going to get more than you would with the first overall pick. Like that's just the way of it. So there's a logic to this. Now I'm still Travis, what's the thing from that draft day movie? Like Travis, what instead of Vontae Mack?
I didn't see draft.
No matter what.
I know it's
so Travis Bazzana, no matter what. It's a terrible movie with terrible draft logic, but it is a Cleveland draft movie. So of course I watched it.
Yes. The other thing with Hagen Smith too is, we don't know for sure, but let's say he pushes himself into the 1-1 conversation by July or June when the season ends. Actually, probably a good chance that he is not going to have a higher bonus demand than a Kurtz, a Bazzana, a Weatherholt, a Griffin. He might have a lower bonus demand. If Cleveland deems that to be worth it, that gives them a chance to spread the bonus out throughout the draft and really clean up and take some good players down the board. That's also going to be a factor. I saw Kylie McDaniel write about that over the weekend, and people have questions about that. We can get into it, but we don't have time today. But Travis Bazzana,
one more thing in on Hagen Smith too, very quickly. Also, super, super duper young. Will not be 21 until August. That's so he is on top of just his general age. He is on top of his greatness. He is one of the youngest college juniors in this class.
Travis Bazzana, after he got dominated by Hagen Smith on Friday, had a great Sunday. He had 2 home runs, a double, 3 hits total, and a walk versus Oklahoma State, who's a pretty solid team. They've got a decent crop of pitchers. I don't know who their Sunday starter is, but
they've always got. They recruit really well for a team that does not develop pitching super well. I just want to throw this out there. Let's take from Aaron Fitt. Travis Bazzana's exit velocities today: 111, 111, 109. NSFW. 3 of those results resulted in a soaring 430-foot home run, a laser home run, and a rocket double. And then to follow up, Aaron Fitt was like, I just had the pleasure of chatting with Travis Bazzana. Cannot be more impressed with him in every single way. The thoughtfulness, the insightfulness of his answers, nothing can. So his charismatic and genuine, and his game, wow. And then Shotgun Spratling, who I really appreciate, was like, I interviewed him last week and had the exact same thought. Like a lot of people are like, and we talked about it, like, this is a kid who was not happy, was not content, and drove.
He was good last year.
I know.
He was good.
He was
he went out and he decided to be better. Yeah.
Yeah. And he worked his tail off. Like, that's the thing. And, I'll talk about it again. Why did Will Benson become great, even though he had maybe the worst swing I've ever seen? Or not great, but why did Will Benson turn into a major leaguer when he had maybe the worst swing I've ever seen in a prep player? It's that work ethic. It's that drive. And again, Will Smith has incredible tools. He's a great player. I just bring this up because like he's an A+ human being with an 80 grade work ethic. Travis Bazzana already has phenomenal physical tools. He's extremely charismatic. If you're like, not another infielder, fine. I bet you he could play center. I bet you he can play right. He can play left. He's a good athlete. It's like
right field.
What he is.
I know the arm is a question. Right field, I don't know, but center or left for sure. I don't care where he plays. I think the bat is going to be special. I don't care.
The bat. I mean, he looks like a guy who could challenge a batting title
and hit 25 bombs. Yeah,
25, maybe even 30. Like maybe
30. And he runs well.
Well, he just does. He is special, and it's like everyone is kind of like, we are very much getting this turning point where he's going to be, I think, sitting atop of most boards in another week or so, just because he's Weatherholt's hurt. Kurtz they're not pitching to him, and he's pressing a little bit. But like Bazzana is just he was awesome, and he found another level, and he excelled in the Cape, and it's like this guy just keeps going. But we've talked about him so much. A lot of guys had great weekends. I say we hold on the Connor Griffin talk just because we don't have enough time. It is a deep talk we need to discuss exactly
maybe tomorrow with Jeff Ponce. Maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, what Mississippi baseball looks like. Mississippi baseball is kind of infamous for being bad and having TJ House as the 6th highest WAR of any Mississippi prep.
I thought we weren't
getting
to that today. Come on.
I know. I'm just gonna throw that out. That's the teaser. Seaver King. I saw the moonshot today against Dayton. I mean, he absolutely unloaded on a right-hander who's a low angle loogie. It's like a hard pitch to pick up. Nick Weissman put that down, I believe is his name, as a senior sign candidate. But it just flies off his bat. But there is some swing and miss. There's some big risk with him.
Yeah, they're not pitching to Kurtz. He had 8 walks over the weekend. 2 were intentional. So not having a great start to the year so far. You want these bigger college names to be dominating smaller competition. So that is a bit of a bummer for sure. I'm pretty close. I'm not going to make the overreaction 2 weeks in, but I'm pretty close to sliding Bazzana over Kurtz right now. I'm still Team Kurtzman's number 1, but another month of this where Kurtz is kind of not being pitched to, having a hard time, making an impact, and Bazzana is just going nuts. I'm going to be moving Bazzana up, and I was already had a number 2. I want to talk about Charlie Condon too. I don't have a lot of time left, but Charlie Condon against Northern Kentucky. So again, take these with a grain of salt. Don't really pay too much attention to the early season of these big school guys facing, the Northern Kentuckys, but the guy just kept hitting missile after missile, and he plays the outfield. I don't know. I have to keep an eye on him. We won't get too deep into Connor Griffin, but he's off to a great start. He is at least in the 1-1 conversation. We'll have to talk more about him in the next couple of days, but he is definitely in the conversation right now. He is probably the only high school player we're talking about. You mentioned Braden Montgomery against Wagner. Again, not a great competition, but
they shut down weekend. Vance Honeycutt last week, and this week he
wasn't great this weekend. I mean, he went 4 for 11, so it's not as if he had a bad weekend. But like you said, he faced probably the best starter he's going to face all year on Friday in Trey Savage. But it's 2 home runs, and he didn't do anything else. Like I mean, pretty much out on Honeycutt at 1-1 right now.
Yeah,
I'm out right now. And then
I like Braden Montgomery. I was just saying before. I think I'm starting to prefer him.
I agree with you there too, because we haven't even seen Braden Montgomery pitch yet. I don't know if he's going to pitch, but he is a special talent. I should say, I'm not ready to slide Bazzana over Kurtz 2 weeks in, so I shouldn't say I'm ready to take Vance Honeycutt off the board 2 weeks in. But I think this weekend alone was a 33% K rate, and ECU is really good. So he's going to face better than that. Like you say, he's going to face Wake Forest, and he's going to face better than that in Major League. I love the tools, but we were talking off air before we started the podcast. You have to have the performance. If you're a 1-1 overall pick, it's not just tools. You have to have the performance to back it up. Everyone's talked Jack Caglione. I know he hit 99. It was his first start of the year. He struck out 7 against Columbia, and he had 3. He hasn't had an extra base hit yet this year. I'm just not ready to. He's in the conversation, but I'm just not ready to put him on the board because it's just too much risk. It's way too much risk at 1.
And it's what we saw with Honeycutt a year ago, where sometimes guys stop swinging and missing, but then they stop tapping into the power as much. We'll have more time for all of this as we have Jeff Ponce on tomorrow. We want to thank you all for joining us, rating, reviewing, downloading. It helps. Thank all of our everydayers, and go.